What if bees were proven intelligent 100 years ago? How did a teacher change science without a lab? How did history forget a brilliant scientist? Can a jar of jam change science forever? Who really discovered that bees can learn?
In 1907, a man in St. Louis proved that bees could learn. The world did not listen. A century later, the world rediscovered the same fact and called it new. His name was Charles Henry Turner. He was 40 years old. He had just become the first African American to earn a PhD in zoology from the University of Chicago. He had no laboratory. He had no research assistants. He had no library. He spent his days teaching biology to high school students. And he changed what science knew about insect minds, 50 years before anyone gave the credit to someone else. How did he do it without a lab? Why did the world ignore him? Here is what to understand about 1907. The science of insect behavior barely existed. Insects were widely thought to be biological machines, small wind-up toys that ran on hardwired instinct and nothing else. The idea that a bee or an ant could learn, remember, or change its behavior based on experience was, for most biologists of the period, a serious overreach. Insects were not minds. They were mechanisms. Into this assumption walked Charles Henry Turner, insect scientist, doctorate freshly in hand, doing experiments that would have been remarkable at any university. He published a doctoral dissertation called The Homing of Ants. It was the first careful experimental study of how ants find their way back to the nest. It appeared in the Journal of Comparative Neurology and Psychology in September 1907. It demonstrated that ants use landmarks, memory, and what we would now call spatial learning. Not instinct alone. Cognition. He should have gone straight into a faculty position. He did not. The University of Chicago, which had just awarded him the doctorate, did not offer him a job. The Tuskegee Institute, where Booker T. Washington wanted to hire him, could not afford his salary. Turner ended up at Sumner High School in St. Louis, teaching teenagers, on a salary that today would be worth roughly $34,000 a year. It was from this high school classroom, with no equipment and no support, that he began producing one of the most quietly important bodies of work in the history of biology. Loops active at end of beat. What did the high school teacher actually discover? Why did the field not absorb it? Here is what Turner did. In the autumn of 1908, he walked out into O'Fallon Park in St. Louis with a notebook and a jar of strawberry jam. He set out small dishes of jam on picnic tables at 3 specific times of day: breakfast, lunch, and dusk. Honeybees, naturally, found the jam. They came back for breakfast. They came back for lunch. They came back at dusk. Then he changed the schedule. He put jam out only at breakfast. The bees still arrived at all 3 feeding times for a while. But when they found no reward at lunch or dusk, they stopped coming at those times. They kept arriving at breakfast. Only breakfast. What Turner had just demonstrated, with a few dishes of jam and a high school teacher's salary, was that honeybees have a sense of time, that they can learn temporal associations between reward and the position of the sun. This is now textbook insect behavior. In 1908, it did not exist as a recognized finding. He did not stop there. He pounded wooden dowels into the park lawn and topped them with colored paper discs. Some red discs held honey. Some blue discs held nothing. He watched which colors the bees learned to associate with food. This was one of the earliest controlled tests of bee color vision in the history of entomology, and it sits at the foundation of every early 20th century entomology textbook that came later, even when it does not credit him by name. Turner went further. He studied cockroaches navigating maze-like environments and showed that they did not always take the same route, that their behavior was variable, modifiable, and shaped by past experience. He worked on spiders and showed evidence of what he called trial and error learning. He studied ants and demonstrated they could recognize landmarks and adjust routes accordingly. Over a career conducted almost entirely from a high school classroom in St. Louis, Turner published, by the most careful count, 49 peer-reviewed scientific papers. His publication rate exceeded most of his contemporaries at well-funded universities. He worked on ants, bees, cockroaches, crustaceans, moths, pigeons, spiders, and wasps. He had no graduate students. He had no formal lab. He had heavy teaching loads and restricted hours. He did the work anyway. Loops active at end of beat. If the work was that good, why is his name not in the textbooks? What happened to it? Many people think the story here is one of straightforward racism, a black scientist ignored by a white scientific establishment, his work later vindicated. The research says something both truer and more uncomfortable than that. The racism was real. The University of Chicago did not offer him a faculty position despite having awarded him their first black zoology PhD. The Tuskegee Institute could not afford him. Sumner High School became his career not by choice, but by the structural shape of American academia in 1908. But the deeper part of the story is this. Turner's papers were not lost. They were not buried. They were published in real journals: the Biological Bulletin, the Journal of Comparative Neurology and Psychology, the American Naturalist. Other scientists read them. They were cited at the time. And then, slowly, over the next several decades, the citations stopped. When the Austrian biologist Carl von Frisch won the Nobel Prize in 1973 for decoding the waggle dance and the color vision of bees, his foundational early experiments closely paralleled work Turner had done 60 years earlier. Von Frisch's name became synonymous with the discovery of bee learning. Turner's name disappeared from the curriculum entirely. This is the part that is uncomfortable. Active suppression is one kind of injustice. Quiet forgetting is another. Lars Chittka, the modern bee cognition researcher, wrote about exactly this problem in the journal Science in 2020, in a paper that called Turner a pioneer in animal cognition and demanded the field reckon with what it had quietly mislaid. In 2024, at the Entomological Society of America's Founders Memorial Lecture, Chittka and Hirini Samadhi Galpage Dona devoted the entire address to Turner's legacy. What they pointed out was simple. Almost every major finding in modern insect cognition, that bees learn, that ants remember, that insects display individuality and even something like emotion, was anticipated, in clear experimental form, in Turner's papers between 1907 and 1922. The field rediscovered the wheel. It just did not credit the man who built the original. And the cost of that forgetting is not only historical. Generations of biologists worked for decades on questions Turner had already partially answered, without knowing his answers existed. That is what institutional erasure does. It does not only erase a person, it slows the field that erased them. How much of what we call modern science is actually rediscovery? What does it cost a field to forget? Here is the central question. If a high school teacher in St. Louis, working with strawberry jam in a public park, had already shown by 1910 what universities would spend the next 70 years rediscovering, what does that tell us about how knowledge actually gets made? And what does it tell us about how easily it gets lost? The story of Charles Henry Turner, insect scientist, is not just a story about race. It is also a story about institutions. Modern science treats knowledge as something that exists only when it is properly credentialed, published in the right journal, by someone at the right university, cited by the right people. The history of animal cognition research is full of work that was done correctly, the first time, by people whose institutional position was wrong. Turner is the clearest case. He is not the only one. The findings Turner published between 1907 and 1922 were not informal. They were experimental, controlled, and replicable. They appeared in peer-reviewed journals. By every formal standard of how science is supposed to work, his contributions should have entered the canon. They did not, because the canon is not built by formal standards alone. It is built by who other researchers choose to cite, by who is in the room when the next paper is written. Turner was almost never in the room. What Chittka and his colleagues are trying to do now, more than 100 years late, is put him back in it. Turner's experiments on the color vision of the honeybee, published in the Biological Bulletin in 1910, is one of the founding documents of bee cognition research. It is available now, freely, in the Internet Archive. Anyone can read it. Almost no one had, until the last few years. The question this raises is uncomfortable. How many more Turners are there? How many quiet discoveries, made by people without institutional power, sit in journals that nobody reopens? The science we currently call modern is a small and selective inheritance from a much larger archive most of us will never read. The man in O'Fallon Park, with his dishes of jam and his notebook, was watching honeybees learn the difference between breakfast and dusk. He knew what he was seeing. The rest of us are still catching up. What other knowledge is the field still failing to inherit? How does any of us know what we actually owe? There is something to sit with here. Charles Henry Turner did not write his papers to be remembered. He wrote them because the bees were doing something interesting, and he wanted to understand it. And he had been taught, by his own training, by his own scientific instinct, that careful observation written down carefully was how knowledge worked. He believed the system. The system did not, particularly, believe him back. He retired from Sumner High School in 1922, in poor health. He died in February 1923, at the age of 56. He had published 49 papers across his career. His last scientific paper appeared the year after his death. The library at Sumner High School was renamed in his honor many decades later. Schools in St. Louis bear his name now. The bees he watched are long gone. The questions he asked are open again and being answered, mostly, by people who did not know until very recently that he had already asked them. The work was always there. The world simply was not yet ready to read it. What he saw, we are still learning to see. What other forgotten observers are waiting in the archive? Who else saw early? Turner is not the only careful observer of insect behavior whose work the institutions of his time mostly ignored. A generation before him, in a quiet stone house in rural Provence, a self-taught French schoolteacher named Jean-Henri Fabre was doing something similar, writing volume after volume of insect observations that Charles Darwin himself called the work of an incomparable observer. Almost no one reads him today. What he saw, and what science took another century to confirm, is the next thing we will look at.